Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, viewers. I'm Matthias of Vekuii, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper, and I'll be your host tonight. Tonight we'll be talking genocide matters, the controversial topic that's been making headlines these days. But before we get into that exciting conversation, let's just have a look at today's headlines. Well, we're joined in studio tonight by the Ovaherero Paramount Chief Advocate Vekuii Rukoro. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Indeed, same here.
Yeah?
Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no. We're speaking genocide today. Can you give us your initial reaction when you got the wind of the deal that was concluded by the Namibian and German governments?
Utter disappointment and shock. Yes.
Yeah. When you heard that news, because I remember, I think it was in 2018, you had mentioned to one of the local media houses and you said that the negotiations are fundamentally flawed.
Yes.
Did you somehow feel vindicated in that regard?
Absolutely. And why are they flawed? Because the process has been flawed right from the beginning. In the sense that if the foundation of a building is flawed, then clearly the entire building, if you continue to build it, is going to fall down at one stage or another. And that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
The key protagonist in this whole exercise happened to be the victim communities. And by victim communities we mean the descendants of the people, the descendants of the people who were killed by the Germans during 1904 to 1908.
Yeah.
And it must be the representatives who represent the majority of those people. And they were not invited to participate or to be part of that process. The people who were invited were representatives of royal house chiefs. And royal house chiefs, by definition, they represent their clans. They are clan representatives. If you have Chief Haufiku, you represent your clan, your family, and not, for instance, the Oshiwambo people at large.
Yeah.
And so, and then what happened is government, on a selective basis, decided to invite representatives from royal houses who were maybe positively disposed towards the cause of government.
Yeah.
What is the end result? The end result is government ended up striking a deal that clearly do not speak to what we as the Ovaherero people and the Nama people actually want.
So what do you think fundamentally government wants to achieve from this when you say that there was a selective choosing of individuals to be part of this process who don't represent the majority, like you say? What do you think they want to get out of this? What is there to get out of this?
Well, whatever they wanted to get out of this is exactly not what we wanted to get out of this. Well, what did they get out of this? They got a development finance package for government. That's not what we wanted to get out of this. We wanted reparations for the victim communities.
Yes.
We wanted a package that will speak to Ovaherero people and Nama people, wherever they are. A lady sitting under a tree in Okakarara, in a Pukiro, that package, there must be something for her to transform her life meaningfully. Or a lady somewhere sitting in Gaborone or somewhere in Mpumalanga, who's a descendant of somebody who was genocided by the Germans. What does the current package say about somebody like that? Absolutely zero. The Germans came here, they murdered 80% of the Ovaherero, 50% of the Namas. They took away, let's say, two-thirds of what used to be our ancestral lands. Now, they want to build tar roads here, they want solar panels there, they want God knows what. Is that what we want? No. So government ended up with, the Namibian government submitted a claim of 1.1 trillion. That is how they assessed the damage. Germany, that's what you owe us. And then they say through a process of give and take, they decided to settle 1.1 billion. That's a huge gap. What is it that the Germans gave up in exchange for government to then end up accepting 1.1 billion? It boggles the mind. But we are not surprised, because fundamentally Germany did not acknowledge the one important pillar, the basis for the negotiations. The basis was that they must acknowledge that they have committed an act of genocide. They did not.
Maybe just to come in there, they said that by 1904 the term genocide was not applicable because it was not recognized by the international community.
That's nonsense.
You coming from a legal background, how would you counter that?
That's complete nonsense. Genocide is a legal, is a crime against humanity. It's a war crime in terms of customary international law and the practice of states. Did exist well in the 1800s. And Germany knows that. The whole world knows that. But Germany, for purely political reasons, to try and evade and avoid their responsibility to pay reparations, are now trying to put a purely German interpretation for the purposes of the negotiations with the Namibian government. Our genocide took place in 1904 to 1908, right? The Jewish Holocaust, when did it take place? 1938 to 1940 something. Well before the United Nations Convention of 1948. How did they treat the Jewish Holocaust? They treated it as a genocide, right? In terms of the understanding of the international community. They apologized for it as a genocide proper, without any qualifications. And they sat down with the State of Israel on the one side and 23 ordinary Jewish communities, right? Exactly as international law and even United Nations principles, which were developed later, prescribe. That when it comes to genocide and reparations issued, the people who are affected by it have a right, separate from their own government, to sit at the table and speak for themselves. And then at the end of those negotiations, they must be paid reparations And the quantum of that reparations must be commensurate with the loss suffered. And it must be reparations.
Yeah.
In our case, what did Germany do? They said they are offering qualified genocide. The acknowledgement is not unqualified, it's not unequivocal. It is genocide, but genocide is understood by German politicians, ruling party politicians, and not as understood by the world community, by the international community. And therefore, the end result is what? It's not payment of reparations. The end result is, as the German foreign minister said when he announced the deal, what did he say? And you saw the statement. He said, we therefore, the German government therefore, decided on, quote unquote, a gesture. That's the statement he used. A gesture by the German government to do what? To, quote unquote again, to support the Namibian government by providing support to the tune of 1.1 billion for funding development projects. So not paying reparations. Yeah, they could not pay reparations of 1.1 billion after having killed 80% of Ovahereros, 50% Namas, taken away our ancestral land, which the land alone would have been in $1 trillion, and taken away more than hundreds of thousands of cattle, which by today's values, when you talk that land and the cattle by today's values, my friend, that's trillions of dollars in the bank. Because cattle to the Herero man, that's the equivalent of trillions of dollars in a bank of Europeans. That's the wealth we lost. And now our government is telling us, like, you know, you're actually owed 1,000 heads of cattle. That's what they're explaining to the Himba people now. The Germans owe you 1,000 cattle, but because of this give and take, we now settled on you just getting 10 heads of cattle. And that's a fair deal, because look forward to the good relationship and the reconciliation we have with the Germans.
But what would you say, from the genesis of all this, had the majority of the affected community, like you put it before, been part of this process, what would have been a commensurate outcome and a figure that we could look at and say, this is a commensurate figure that we can work with going forward?
The key is that we would have sat there with the Germans and we would have said first things first. We would have said, our friends, respect us the way you have respected the Jewish people of Israel. Right? Don't tell us that you cannot sit with us because we are a non-state, non-sovereign entity, because that's what they told us. That no, we cannot talk to you. We can only talk to your government. That's why the discussions were built as state to state, bilateral. And we said that's nonsense. How come you sat down with the Jewish groups, 23 of them? So you are refusing to sit with us, but way back, you created the precedent to sit with non-state, non-sovereign entities. And they had no response to it. And my statement to Mr. Pollens was, yes, I don't know why you don't have an answer. It's because they were white Europeans and we are black Africans. And your attitude is pure racism. There's no other answer to it. And our government is beholden to you. You are treating them like a client state. And you, because you are their paymaster in terms of development assistance, they are not standing up to you. And instead, now they are even agreeing that we should not be there. In fact, just a group that represent minority of our people should be there, and they must come under their wing as people, advisors on technical committees of Dr. Gavirwe, who happen to be an employee of the Namibian state. Do these people represent us? No. They're on the payroll of the Namibian government. So, end result is what? Read the agreement. What does it say? Declaration ended into between who and who?
Yeah.
German government and Namibian government.
Yeah.
Go and read the agreements between the German government and the Israeli government. Those are two separate agreements. One between German government, Protocol 1, and Israeli government. Protocol 2, German government and the affected ordinary Jewish groups, addressing their needs as negotiated by them.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. So, in our case, had we been there, firstly, we would have said, Israel, don't bullshit us. We would have said, or rather, Germany, don't bullshit us. We would have said, we want an unqualified acknowledgement of genocide, because we know that such an acknowledgement would result in only one thing, payment of reparations. Right?
Yeah.
To us, and not to the Namibian government. If they want to discuss development aid, bilateral aid, that should not even feature in our discussions. That's a separate matter between two governments. Secondly, we know that the apology that must come must be an apology for what? It must be an apology for the genocide as acknowledged.
Yeah.
Now the apology that the German government now is going to offer here, the president.
The president is coming.
To do what? To offer apology for what? To offer apology for the genocide as apology for the crime as acknowledged. What is the crime? The crime is in those paragraphs in the declaration.
Yeah.
And they talk of the wounds that are open, the atrocities committed by German, Imperial Germany during the period 1904, 1904, what's name? And if you want, the genocide is qualified.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the apology we, as the descendants of the ancestors who were killed in cold blood, are looking forward to receive.
Yeah.
You know, that's the apology of the Namibian government that they maybe will be happy with, not us. And therefore, that kind of apology is a total insult to the memory of our ancestors, is a total insult to us as the descendants. We don't need that.
Yeah.
As far as we are concerned, the German president is a persona non grata. We don't want him here. He can fly to the moon.
Yeah. Advocate, do you think there are some school of thoughts where some people are saying that perhaps we depended too much on the Israel matter instead of coming up with our own, perhaps, situation as to how we want things to go during these negotiations? As to making too much reference to Israel, do you think there's any credence in such talks?
No, those are apologists of how the Namibian government approached this thing. Absolutely. The point is simple. We have a right to speak for ourselves, because only we know what we want. They say the one who's close to the fire knows how hot it is, not the guy who's 10 feet away from the fire. We, 100 years later, we feel the effects of the genocide, my brother. Not the guys who are not the products of that genocide. The fundamental question here is, the liberation struggle was about what? Maybe for other people it was just about the South African flag being lowered and the Namibian flag going up. For the Herero and the Nama, the liberation struggle was about the land, right? Others were oppressed on their own ancestral land.
Yeah.
And therefore, liberation for them was the lowering of the oppressor's flag and the South Africans going back to their country.
Yeah.
For us, it was more than the South Africans seeing the backside of the South Africans. Our land is not back yet. Not at all. For the Herero, freedom, uhuru, independence, our means of livelihood is the combination of land and cattle. Those were deprived forever.
Yeah.
And the Hereros do not have it. The Namas do not have it. And the 1.1 billion with respect, compared to the losses that we suffered, it's a joke.
Yeah.
It's an insult. And will not accept that.
Yeah. You spoke at length about the issue of the land and the recovery of the lost land. Considering the current policies around land and the legislation around land in the country, do you see us making any strides in recovering that land under the current conditions?
Well, not with the current policies that have been pursued since independence, because they lack political will.
Yeah.
They lack political will. There seemed to be a conspiracy between the political power in the country and the economic power that is in the hands of the status quo.
Yeah.
So there need to be a fundamental change. And that is yet to come.
Yeah.
But it will come. It will come. Oppressed people, somehow history tells us and teaches us that one way or another, they will rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Because you can't live on an island of, wealth amidst a sea of poverty and misery. It's unsustainable.
Yeah. Because the reason why I asked that question is you'll see that most of the lawmakers, if I might put it that way, are farm owners. They own farms, whether it's productive or not productive. So clearly they see the value in the ownership of land. So why then, you said it's a lack of political will, that's why the status quo exists, where most of the Namibians are deprived of owning land. Why the disparity then?
Well, maybe they have become part of the bourgeoisie. They have become land barons themselves. They are part of another class altogether. And they don't see, they don't hear what these people at the bottom of the heap are talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just as we round up, do you think, because I remember being part of a conversation on social media during the weekend, and someone asked, is it really fair for Namibia, in light of the agreement, to buy back land that was taken from Namibians.
To buy back land that was taken from Namibians?
Yes, through the genocide.
Without compensation. It was taken away from them without compensation.
Yeah.
Now we have to buy back that land. You're asking that question, you're putting that question to the wrong person. My friend. You're putting that question to the wrong person. But if that's what peace, what it takes to continue to have peace in the country, and if Germany wants to make sure that the little Switzerland we have created here on African soil, we should retain this little Switzerland, then they must be ready at least to provide the necessary funding to retain that peace.
Yeah.
And they must realize that the 1.1 billion, for which maybe, I don't know how much, is it 500 million out of that?
Yeah, I think it's about 540, I think.
They say that is now for the land, to buy the land. How much land will that be? That's a joke. That's a joke. So I don't care if German money should come and pay for the land occupied by the descendants of the settlers they brought here, in order for the descendants of those that they killed as a result of the extermination order, in order to bring some restorative justice and peace and harmony. So be it, as long as it's their money and not our tax dollars.
Yeah.
The bigger problem is if through a policy of racism, neocolonialism, and a policy of being pound foolish and penny wise, through these 1.1 billion euro insults, one day they should wake up and Namibia goes in flames. Then obviously they should realize that Namibia, the once peaceful Switzerland of Africa, there's only one party to blame.
Yeah.
It's themselves, it's Germany, and nobody else.
Yeah. So, lastly, the two governments have signed the deal. What's the way forward now from your side of the coin? Being the majority and you feel you've been left out of this whole process.
We reject that deal. We'll oppose it with all the means at our disposal. We are lobbying our politicians, the opposition parties, to throw it out. We are lobbying the patriotic members of parliament on the ruling party side who still maintain the ethos and values of liberation, to throw it out. And we are actually confident that the deal will not pass our National Assembly. Based on that, the government, I suspect, will be surprised. And should the unforeseen happen and it actually passes, that will not be the end. We will still fight it. Even in Germany, we will fight it at the diplomatic level, through the United Nations, through selected world powers, through the AU, through other African governments, and make sure that Germany is declared a pariah state, a war criminal, and even through alternative legal forums and jurisdictions, including here locally, through our own courts, and other international courts,
Yeah.
just to make sure that in the end, restorative justice is achieved.
Yeah.
Should all of this fail, we will still have one last bullet left. For that, watch the space.
Yeah. Advocate Rukoro, thank you very much for your insight.
Pleasure indeed.
All the best going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.